And welcome to this episode of the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast, where I am delighted to be joined by Mike Raven, who is the founder at AQAI. Mike, welcome.
Hi, Fred. Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. And as you know, when we were chatting before, whenever I see anything that's a something Q, it really piques my interest. And so I saw AQ and thought, oh, what's all that about? And we had a chat, and I thought, you know what, this is really, really interesting. I want to share this out to the salespeople who listen to this because I think it's highly relevant. So, can you tell us what AQ is?
I can certainly try. so, the A in AQ is all about adaptability. And adaptability is really a behavior and a skill. And it's the capacity to adjust your thoughts and behaviors in order to effectively respond to uncertainty, to change circumstances, or perhaps to new information. And it's been more and more proven to be essential to an individual's well-being, their psychological health, their success at work, their social success, and any sort of academic achievement as well. So the AQ, the adaptability quotient, is really that metric of adaptability. So it's you could call it your adaptability intelligence, as they call, EQ is your emotional intelligence, and it's about measuring those skills, those abilities, those characteristics that make up your adaptability.
How interesting. So, before we talk about success at work, let's talk about the important stuff, which is the first stuff you mentioned, which is about well-being and psychologically being sound. How does it help with that? I mean, I think this is really important that we should focus on this first.
Yeah, I mean, in the model that's now a couple of decades old and used, widely across the globe of emotional intelligence, adaptability is one of those core 6 elements inside, your EQ. And so we've taken it a layer further and to unravel what is adaptability. And out of the sort of 15 different sub-dimensions that we have, so things like your emotional range, your ability to hold different thoughts and ideas, so that mental flexibility that you have, your relationship to stress, which is obviously something that's, I think, more so in the last year we've experienced in lots of different levels. So there's lots of the different metrics and measurements of adaptability that come to play in somebody's psychological well-being. Our relationship to uncertainty is really one of the primary factors in our anxiety and stress response. So when something's not known and not normal to us, how we respond to that really can determine a lot of our mindset and and therefore our relationship to that current moment, which could either be in flight or fight response, or it could be in this is a challenge I'm ready and able to deal with.
Oh, cool. So AQ is a metric. AQ will measure how good or bad, for want of a better word, we are in each of these subsets. And you said it's 15 subsets. And so when we know that, if we can measure it, and you talked about behaviors and skills, means we can then do something about it, correct?
Exactly, spot on. So some of the things in terms of our kind of innate relationship to change doesn't really shift. It's quite stable. That's our character. That's some of our personality, right? It's kind of what we've learned over time, which would be quite difficult to change. It's whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, maybe whether you're generally a very sort of optimistic person or perhaps more of a skeptical person. So those things don't generally tend to shift, but yeah, your skills and your abilities certainly do. So how you can learn to bounce back from adversity or from an obstacle. How you, how quickly you can create new neural pathways, which is kind of new information, how that's stored, how that new information can interact with other things going on that in your life or in your future life. So there's a lot of things we can do to build our skill sets of abilities around adaptability. The other is your environment. So your environment at work, your social circles, the 5 people perhaps that you spend the most amount of time with, the news feed that you decide and choose to digest, the books, the films, the music, what's in front of you in your place of work. Do you have posters? Do you have, what's the information that you're feeding your mindset? Because that will determine a lot of your adaptability as well. And if those 5 people around you are very change adverse, are very cautious, are more skeptical than hopeful, are perhaps stuck in their ways, you're likely to follow suit. So it's really important that we're aware of these things in developing a much more positive relationship with change and uncertainty.
Okay, so positive relationship with change and uncertainty. And I mean, I say just, wrong word, but you can use this just for yourself. By understanding it better, can you then use this with other people? So, I'm probably asking the question wrong. So, if I think of EQ, I always think of 2 parts to it. There's understanding yourself and being able to manage it yourself. There's also understanding other people and then sort of doing things, managing the relationship, if you like, by what you say and do. Is that the same with AQ then?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's kind of, I like to refer to it as almost a shared language around change. And if you can build a shared language, using a similar framework to someone else, then you can begin to understand, especially if they're someone close to you, if it's a personal relationship or a work colleague or somebody you manage or that you're being managed by, then understanding that they're going to be different to you. Their experiences of challenges and uncertainty and changing environments will be different to you. And for example, if I knew that one of my colleagues was particularly introverted, so they don't, perhaps they get much more energy from individual conversations rather than big group social interactions. They'd much rather be having a coffee with somebody, talking, than going to a big party or a big networking event, for example. Or if I know that somebody perhaps takes a lot longer to to recover from a setback, if I know that they've got a low resilience, that's not me judging them, and vice versa. It's actually information, data that we can use to adjust our behaviours with those people to get better outcomes for everyone. For example, I'll give you a real example. There's one of our clients who makes they're an organisation, a big 5 engineering firm, and they make 7 or 8 acquisitions every year. So that's their growth model. And so suddenly you're taking hundreds of employees from an existing culture and business, and you're asking them to convert to a central business, a new culture, a new way of interacting, communicating, a new set of rules. And if you know that they've got perhaps more of a blockage, a blocking relationship to change, a try and avoid change where possible, then you can change the way you communicate and maybe the timelines you can put in place to help those people adjust to a new culture. Because at the other end of the spectrum, you are going to have people who are constantly seeking change. and great, new culture, new people, new stuff to learn, can't wait, and they're off. But then people are going to get left behind, and there'll always be people on different ends of the spectrum. And it's not it's not to say either is wrong. It's just it's just how you've been wired. So you need to understand this information at different levels in organizations, at different levels of relationship, just so you can know where you're coming from and speak the same language. It's we're not mirrors to each other. We're not we're not all the same.
Absolutely not. And I'm thinking of, sort of sales training that I get involved with and have been involved with over the years. Very often we'll talk about the social styles. So depending what model we feel like using, so colors or amiable expressive analytical driver or different birds, animals, Harry Potter houses seems to be popular at the moment.
Yeah.
And when we train that, I mean, if both parties understand it, great, it happens a lot quicker. But actually, even if only one does, they can be the smart one that makes the behavior flex. Is that similar with AQ then? So if one person's got it, they can then, could be a bit advised with language, but use it or apply it. If both parties do, then it happens even faster. Is that a fair comparison I'm making to try to make sense of it myself?
Yeah, I think it's perhaps it's that phrase of good enough if it's just you, because you're, if we're all taking responsibility for ourselves, then the world will be in a better place. Relationships will be better. Our outcomes will usually be better, and we'll have a lot more success. But if you're engaging in a shared language, then I think the opportunity for impacting at a larger scale just exponentially increases. It's a bit like coaching and training. If you're coaching an individual, that individual will improve. There's no doubt about it. The coaching is good, but that individual's ability to then impact a whole organization is difficult. But if you're coaching a team in this, and you can understand the metrics behind that sort of coaching and how you're looking to improve that team has been proven to have a far bigger impact on the whole organization. So improve one person, great for that individual, unlikely to massively impact a business outcome. But if you're training at a team level and looking at a team's AQ, for example, through this lens of adaptability, then you're more likely to impact the whole organization. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. No, and what I'm trying to do is, because I'm going to come at it from the sales angle, as you know, and certainly if I've acquired a business or merged a business, you can say, well, okay, everybody's going to go through this, so everyone will understand it. The speed to use it will be faster because, as you say, the same language, we know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it. Not one better than the other, which just different, and we understand it and we can react. Cool. Salespeople though can't really say to customer, do you know, before I come to see you, can you just fill this questionnaire in for me? Because then I'll be able to work far. Now, actually, that said, I think in some circumstances that probably should be something we are doing, whether we're using PQ, AQ, because if we're serious about collaborating, then that would be a logical and very kind of forward-thinking step. But if it's really like, okay, I'm an individual, I can get my head around it, how can I then use that to sort of, I don't know, flex or get the most out of that relationship, get the most from this learning?
Yeah, it's a really good point. A lot of us work in silos, especially as now we've shifted to more of a distributed workforce, working from home, that kind of flexibility of remote work. And for salespeople, they can often be isolated, and it's very much initially at least a one-way relationship where you're just trying to discover. Right, a job for a salesperson is about actually discovering what the challenges are this other person, this team, or this organization is facing, because it's and then it's your job to try and solve that. And I think you can just start with yourself, in terms of, if I've worked in sales in the past, and the number of knockbacks you get, it's huge, and it's part of the territory, and so therefore you need to have this resilience, you need to have this grit behind you, you need to know what your goal is, and be able to have that motivation to to reach that goal, and the resilience to get back up each time you get a no, because no's are inevitable, and they're good, they're healthy, because it means that you're going to learn. If it's always yeses, then how are you going to improve and work on your own abilities? And I think what will happen in a lot of sales journeys for a lot of salespeople is that they'll through this learning, they'll need to let go of how they thought they should perhaps position something, or the different conversation routes that they should take. So this ability to unlearn what they think might work and then doesn't is really important. So rather than perhaps, like you said, that ideal world of, I would love to understand the AQ of somebody that I'm talking to that's a brand new relationship. But at least if you know in yourself that you've got, you can bounce back, you can flex the way you're speaking and working in the conversation, you can adapt your thinking style to that situation very quickly. If you need to take 20-30 seconds to figure out, okay, well, I didn't expect them to say this, now what do I do with that new information, then you could lose the relationship very quickly. But if you're able to adapt quickly and form those quick neural pathways to this new set of information, you've got much more opportunity to build a trusting relationship, which I think is perhaps where those salespeople are looking to get to, right? And a trusting relationship. They want people that they're talking to like them, to trust them, and know that they can deliver a solution for them.
No, that makes total sense. Begin with self, and to be able to do that would improve selling no end. Even just the first thing you said is like, let go of your normal positioning, unlearn. And we see this, don't we? We see people who just get stuck doing that. The phrase I love, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That's how they do it. Route one, that's how I do things. That's my way. Okay, well, your way doesn't work this time. What other options? And the ability to change on the fly, and that isn't about winging it. It's not about winging it. It's about knowing how to and having the skills, because you practice them, you've learned them, you understand them, you practice them. Because you actually said, you change your neural pathways. Can you go into that a little bit more detail? As soon as we start talking about neural pathways, it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of science emerging around this. About doesn't matter what age we are, in our past experiences, we know we have the ability to physically create new neural links in our brain. There's a great phrase I've heard of what fires together wires together. So when two things fire in your brain, and they might be new information or something you've read or something that that shows up for you, and you can create a connection between the two of them. If you keep repeating that, if it's often down to the repetition of that new information, really taking time to consider it, think about it, discuss it with other people, it will create, it'll wire together, it'll create a new pathway. So it's a bit like what I said at the start of the show around, adaptability is how we respond to new information, change circumstances. That can happen instantly, on a inside a conversation. It can happen a bit slower over time, but it's our responses to that information that defines the result.
And so get into a little bit more detail. How can people do this? What do you guys? How do you guys help them, really?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like, I try and use the analogy of, if I was looking to lose weight, for example, if you haven't measured, if you haven't weighed yourself first, and you haven't set a goal, well, it's going to be very difficult. course, you can still, you can still go for some runs and go to the gym and all these things and change your diet, but you won't be able to track your progress, and you need that starting point. It's been said many times that you'll struggle to manage or improve something that you can't measure. So the starting point is always measuring your AQ, and we have an assessment that's been scientifically validated. It's the world's first of its kind. It's being used in organizations like Microsoft and UN agencies and federal governments already. And it gives you that benchmark of understanding your AQ that's completely and utterly unique to you. And then you can look at these different sub-dimensions of adaptability we've been talking about, like unlearning, like resilience, like your mental flexibility, and you can find where there's opportunities for growth. So it might be that once you've understood your AQ profile, that there's three or four key areas where you might be lacking, in that particular skill. So we've built into our platform just some foundational elements to help you start thinking about and improving those dimensions. So for grit, for example, if I have low grit, I like reading, I might start really getting into Angela Duckworth's book about grit. Or if I like watching videos, there's TED Talks by the same author. We had a lot of content around podcasts, around really simple online courses that you can take that are free, to start to look at those different areas. And that's at least a start, starting to build that foundational knowledge. Because once something becomes interesting to you, once you start to research and read or watch or listen into an area and lean in, you'll automatically start to improve it. That's the way. That's a great thing about us human beings. And there's then a whole community of AQ certified coaches and consultants that we have, over 100 around the world, who any individual team or organization can engage with to start to look at deeper programs of focusing on improving their AQ. So there's a very individual level that comes straight from taking the AQ assessment, all the way through to much deeper programs over longer periods of time.
Okay. And just for reference, grit, it's one of those things I think people often kind of get what it is. Can you just give us the definition of it?
Definition of grit, yeah. I mean, there's I will give you the official definition from our book, and so it's the ability to stay on course, to follow through when approaching important goals. So you need to know the goal first. So you'll struggle to have a lot of grit if you don't have goals.
Yeah.
You're not going towards anywhere at any point. But it's that staying on course, and it's so it's not a personality trait. It's a skill, and there's a lot of research to show that you can develop grit over time, learn methods to persevere and to reach long-term goals. And I think Angela Duckworth, for example, talks about an emphasis on stamina. So stamina has a lot to do with grit. So especially in sport, you might hear the word stamina, used a lot, and that can be quite interchangeable with grit at times. But yeah, it's absolutely essential in terms of, especially if you have particular goals. And for sales, in the world of sales, goals are really important, of course.
Yeah, whether it's a yearly target that just seems so big, so far off, or if you're on a longer term, more complex project that's becoming tough, it's staying on course. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. No, really interesting stuff. So people can look at this themselves. A sales leader listening to this, they can say, well, actually, this makes sense. I want my team, of course I want them to be adaptable, but I want them to have the skills to be adaptable and learn how to do it and apply that deliberately. So they can certainly get in touch. What What other things, again, almost I hate asking for tips because it kind of belittles stuff a little bit, but what kind of other things or the pointers is a better way of saying it, would you give to people just to start to get their head around AQ and how they could use it?
Yeah, I think a great tip is to think about what's shaping your mindset, and taking 5 or 10 minutes of thinking time to maybe write down or think about, what are you consuming? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you reading? And how is that impacting your mindset? Because you're in control of that. You can choose what you subscribe to. You can choose what you're watching. Um, Maybe think about your community. How do you think your community is impacting your different adaptability skills? Whether it's your community at work, your community in a particular network of a hobby that you might have, or maybe at home. How is that impacting your mindset? And look around you. What is your surroundings? Um, what does your surroundings look like? What does your office look like? Um, where are you spending most of your time, and how might that be impacting your relationship with change? And there may be a bit about your experiences. So, what new things have you sought out? What new experiences have you sought out in the last week, in the last month, in the last year? And maybe reflect on those. So has that had a positive impact on me? How does that develop me as an individual? And if that's the case, what have I got coming up? Doing different things and doing them with different people helps our adaptability, helps these new neural pathways form. Doing the same thing with the same people and continuously doing the same thing is a recipe for it's a bad recipe for navigating the very this crazy decade ahead of us. It really is.
Avoid the same old, same old. And that's how people answer things. Yeah, how you getting on? Same old, same old. You must cringe when you hear that. Like, oh, don't hear that. Let me give you the questionnaire. Here, watch this video.
Yeah.
No, but
So
joke apart, avoid the same old, same old.
yeah, do if it's one thing, just take that and find some different people to do some different things with in the next week, in the next month. And just lean into it. Lean into that. It'll be uncomfortable, but progress only happens when you lean into discomfort.
Yeah, I'm anybody who's been on a course with me will go, oh, don't start Fred on comfort zones, whatever you do. No, but it's so important, isn't it? I mean, it is our job to help people. I used to say push people, help people out of their comfort. I do push them sometimes, but out the comfort zone, because that is the learning zone. That's the stretch zone, isn't it? And that's where the pathways, the neural pathways and everything, those habits are developing to make a difference.
Yeah, there's some organisations that we work with that actively take people from their comfortable seats. Whether it's a salesperson or somebody working in marketing or someone in the HR team, and they swap them over. They give them at least a day or two in that other seat with a little bit of training, but just to say, experience this. It helps build empathy. It helps build holistic understanding, and doing those different things just makes you think differently about those, about your whole business, about the work that you're doing, and the different pressures that all of us face, and all the different roles that come about.
So I think that's a really good thing to kind of start to wind up on. So do something different every day.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be massive, I think, is what I've understood there. It's not like, right, Monday, booked parachute jump, Tuesday, abseil down inside a building. I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. No. But it's just something slightly different. Go and sit in a different chair in the office. That will make you feel probably a little bit uncomfortable, actually, if you're so used to doing the same thing, won't it?
Yeah, there's a great quote. I can't remember who it is, but it's something like, if you're not embarrassed by the person you were a year ago, you haven't learned enough. And I think there's such a multitude now, this explosion of online learning that we can access anywhere, anytime, to feed our curiosity, to build our curiosity as well. But there's courses that take an hour. There's courses that take 100 hours. Just going on a different walk from the walk that you usually take. A different cycle route. How many times have you driven a car to your workplace or to the gym or somewhere that you go to a lot, and you think, how did I get here? I don't even remember that drive. But if you take a different route, you've got to stay alert. You've got to learn a new route. So, like you said, it can be small things. Whether it's having something different in your sandwich than you usually have. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. It would all be helpful to building those AQ muscles.
Brilliant. So that's our challenge. I don't usually finish a podcast with a challenge, but that is our challenge at the end of the podcast, is to people to do something different every day and write it down. I think if you write it down, so you're measuring it and say, right, this is what I did different today, that will prompt a change. That'll help people immediately with their AQ.
Yeah, write it down, share it. Lots of people are journaling now, but it's an interesting conversation starter, isn't it? What did you do differently today? What was new this week? And I'd like to, I don't know if I can share a quick story.
Oh, please. Yeah, we love stories.
To finish. But it's a real story. This was kind of back in sort of around 1950, but there were 13 men that actually, firefighters who passed away fighting a blaze in the US, and it was called Man Gulch. And there were 16 firefighters in total that were trying to put out a relatively small forest fire. And the winds changed quite dramatically and it got out of control. And the only way out was for these firefighters, and they were, I think, I can't remember what they're called, but they're the ones that would come and sort of parachute in, and they could only escape by climbing a almost a vertical cliff to get away. And they would carry all of their gear, all of their firefighting gear, which is probably weighs just as much as they do. And all 13 that died were trying to climb that cliff, carrying all of their gear, axes, backpacks, all kinds of things. The 3 that survived, two of them dropped everything to climb, and one of them actually burnt a small area around him using matches, so that there was nothing to burn in his vicinity, and lie down. So the fire actually that was an ancient, I think, American Indian strategy. But if you think about that for a second, these firefighters were taught in their training to always keep your gear on you. Everywhere you go, you take your gear. So that's what they learned. And they weren't able to unlearn that in extreme change circumstances very quickly. 2 of them did. They survived. One of them did something completely differently and survived. Those that just did what they were always told to do and what they were trained to do, devastatingly didn't make it. So I think there's a lesson there to learn about how we react to change circumstances, and our ability to let go of how we think something should be done.
That is such a powerful story. Now that is really cool to end on. Apart from, best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is aqai.io. So a bit of a just 6 letters there, but aqai.io. You can take your assessment. You can reach out to us. There's a film to watch. We put a lot of time and effort into looking at why we're doing this in the first place, as a short 10-minute film, actually directed by a multi-Emmy award-winning director. So always good for a coffee and to watch something new for 10 minutes. We talked earlier about what you consume. Go and consume that. And LinkedIn, Mike Raven. Look me up on LinkedIn. Love to have a conversation about my favorite topic, which is adaptability.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing today. I'll share those links in the show notes. But that's really decent of you to just get us thinking about how we can do things differently and become more adaptable. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Luke. Take care.